the bicentennial, when this series ended, we wanted to do more public art, and we naturally said, what's next? And that's, okay, what's going on in our city today and what's happening in the future. And so we polled the community and asked them to tell us themes that they'd like to see interpreted in public art that affect our community today. So we came up with 5 themes that got the most votes from the community, essentially, that we're going to interpret through a new series called the Today and Tomorrow series. So those themes that we came up with, or that the community came up with, are sustainability, education and literacy, the arts and design, diversity and human rights, and social change. And so we decided to start with sustainability, partially because 2015 is the Yes Fest in Louisville, which is the year of environment and sustainability. So we wanted to tie in with that. But we recognize that we know how to do art, we know how to do public art, but we don't know much about sustainability. So we said, who knows the most about sustainability in our community? And of course, our first reaction was Bernheim. So we got in touch with Mark Worms and Claude Stephens and asked if they would be interested in partnering with us to help us interpret the theme of sustainability with the goals of getting artists inspiration to work off of to create proposals for the project, but also to share education with our community about sustainability and start a conversation about this topic and about things that we could do in New Albany toward making the city more sustainable for the future. So that's what led us to today, and we're thrilled to be working with Bernheim. So I've probably taken up enough time, so Claude, you can take it from here. Thank you so much for being here.
This is not my favorite arrangement, me, you. I want this to be very informal, so think of this as you're on the front porch, and there are no rules, okay? So you are a part of this program as much as I am. And the first thing I want to get out there is that the talk is about sustainability. But can you please read the 5 themes again?
The 5 themes are education and literacy, diversity and human rights, social change, and the arts and design, and then sustainability.
And I'm glad you started with sustainability because what we're talking about is all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing I want to get out there is that I'm not going to talk to you about low flush toilets and solar panels and recycled content in steel and carbon footprints. That's not really what I want to talk about tonight. I want to step back and talk about kind of the philosophy, if you will, about what is sustainability. And the first thing I want to do is talk about language. So you have a little piece of paper in front of you, and it's got a word on it. There's 2 words. You only have 1. For just one moment in time, write down a thought or a thing or something that is brought to mind, kind of top of mind, when you see the word that's written on your piece of paper, and write it down on there, if you would, please. And don't labor too much about it. This is more like a Rorschach test kind of a thing than anything else. And just hold on to it. I'm not going to collect them, and this is not a test, but sustainability is kind of a buzzword. It's out there all the time. Everybody is going green. We just went green. Our company is green. We are now sustainable. If you dig into the details of that statement from many people, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. So I want to address the word sustainable because to me, I am totally out of love with that word. And I'm in love with another word, and some of you have that word. Does everybody write something down? There's 2 words. Some of you had the word sustainable, and some of you had the word regenerative. Before we reveal anything with those, I want to talk about targets. Anybody here an archer? Zen archery or anything like that? Okay. What do you know about targets?
It's what we're aiming for.
It's what you're aiming for. You know, if this is a target, you would be aiming for, under traditional terms, probably that red dot, right? So let's pretend for a moment that you are an archer. And you're aiming to hit your arrow right in the middle of that red dot. So what do? You load an arrow. So go ahead and do that, but let's be fifth graders for a second. You know, load an arrow and pull your bow back and tell me where you're aiming. Somebody, let's see. Dennis, where are you aiming?
Slightly above the red dot.
So tell me where you're aiming.
It's still within the first circle.
Right here?
Yes.
Okay, that's where you aimed. How about you? Where were you aiming?
Well, I'm close enough to aim right at the red.
All right, good point. So maybe right there so that it might hit right there. How about all the way at the back? Where are you aiming?
I was actually aiming low because I didn't shoot high.
Okay, all right. So aim low. So targets is what we're all always aiming at, and it's the grade that we're going to get on the paper. It's the percentage of energy we're going to get from our solar panels. It's whatever it is. It's our relationships. You know, we want our relationships to be good, right? So let me ask you this. If somebody came up to you and said, how is your relationship with your wife or your husband? And then my wife is sitting here next to me, and somebody asked me, how's my relationship with her? And I said, oh, it's sustainable. Right? I'm in trouble. Right. Some of you all have another word. It's the word that I am more in love with in terms of the way we think about the things that we do as humans, and it's regenerative. And so regenerative is up here, and sustainable is right here, and damaging is down here in our target. But if we aim at this, aim at sustainability, almost every single thing we do is going to end up down here. Because Dick Dennis knows, as an archer, that if you aim here, you've missed the mark before you even let the arrow go out of the bow. You have to aim up here. And the art of archery is knowing how high above your target to aim. That's the art. And so, what are the things that changes that aim? Well, it's distance. It's the strength of your bow. It's, your mental resources. Every single project that we pull in front of us as humans has that kind of dynamic going on. Well, I would argue that we are aiming at the wrong spot as a society when we talk about sustainability. So some of you wrote down words on your paper. I want to talk to you about a spectrum of thinking. We could be way down here on the spectrum, which is kind of like damaging things, which is what a lot of what we've done, either out of neglect or lack of knowledge or lack of imagination, or we didn't frame the question right. The things that we normally do, business as usual, is way over here on the spectrum. But we're here to talk about sustainability. So let's pull it in and say, okay, we're aiming at things that are sustainable. But that's the low end of the spectrum in this new way that I hope we can begin thinking about it. So what are some of the things that, if you had sustainable written down on your piece of paper, let me know some of the things that you wrote down on your piece of paper.
I wrote down, as I saw it in my mind, what it means to me, living in harmony.
Living in harmony. Somebody else?
I put down taking only your share and being able to replace it for others.
Okay, and replace.
Creative reproduction.
Oh. Creative what?
Reproduction.
Creative
Reproduction.
reproduction. Some others. There's no right or wrong here. So, Dick,
Wise use of resources.
wise use. Anybody else?
I wrote down Native American way of life.
Native American way of life.
So we're talking.
Yeah.
Now, who had regenerative? What did you write down?
I wrote down Jasper Johns.
Jasper Johns. Okay.
That's true artist right there.
Healing?
Healing,
Natural cycle.
natural cycle. What else?
Recycle.
Recycle,
Bioremediation.
bioremediation.
A phoenix.
A phoenix.
I don't need to write this. I thought of plants that are cut down and come back up in place.
That's what I'll write, plants that return after being cut. Okay. This is a more even distribution, kind of qualitative ways of looking at these things than you would typically get. If in a typical crowd of people under sustainable, you would typically get words like recycling or solar, some of the strategy kinds of things. Living in harmony, I think, is kind of a regenerative way. So I think, some of the things that got written over here actually kind of fall more along the spectrum toward regenerative. Here's the way we think about sustainability in the dominant paradigm today. So I built a sustainable house. I have reduced the amount of energy that I need to run that house. That's good, right? That's sustainable. Regenerative would be, I built a house. My house creates more energy than I need, so I am shoving energy into the grid for others to use. Okay? Over here, sustainable thinking might be, I have put in low flush toilets. I only need 1 gallon of water to flush my toilets, and most of the time. Regenerative thinking would be, on my property, I capture rainwater, and the only water I use is the water that I get. Okay, so sustainable book might be, I am reducing my carbon footprint. Regenerative thinking is, I have a negative carbon footprint. My property and the things that I've designed suck more carbon out of our atmosphere than I put back into the atmosphere, even after you account for my energy and the energy embedded in the materials that I buy. So we're talking about a spectrum here, and I think, and this is philosophical, that really all of these systematic problems that we're worried about, which include everything from environmental concerns to biosphere harm to global extinctions. Many scientists believe we're in a moment in time. We don't really see it because we're here such a short time, and nature works on such long-term horizons, but we're in the middle of a huge extinction. Climate shifts, irreversible habitat degradation or loss, we're losing huge scarcity of resources. All of those things that we try to address with sustainability are really all linked together, and they're one single crisis, which is really a crisis of perception. Okay. So that's kind of what I want to talk about, is what do we perceive? And often, when we talk about things, we package them up. We put them in little packages and boundaries. So the way we used to think about humans and the bigger world around us is, here's us, and there's this big wall, and here's nature. Okay, and we are apart from nature. Our perception is, here we are, there that stuff is, that outer world. Beyond the walls of our village is nature. And for so long, and still today, our job is to subdue it, tame it, control it, harvest it. Okay, but that is a perception problem. Really, here's what we're talking about. Here's us again, and here's nature, and kind of here's where we are today. We're beginning to go get rid of that wall, and we're starting to think about us as a subset of nature. And here's where we need to go. We need to get rid of this wall too. It just needs to be us is nature. And that's really where we are. It doesn't matter what our perception is, we're a part of the natural world. So every single thing that is in this room was harvested from nature, or is nature. The air, the water, the soil, the energy, and the communities around us. And those are the 5 things that whenever I think about sustainability, I boil it all down to one of those 5 things. Here they are again. It's air, water, soil. And by soil, this is all the stuff that comes with soil. It's the minerals and the ores and those kinds of things. Energy, because all systems have to run on energy. All energy is solar energy, all of it. There is no such thing as anything other than solar energy, chemical energy. But coal, solar energy, right? Natural gas, solar energy, right? It's just fossilized solar energy. We only have really one energy source that we're talking about, and then community. And so these are the 5 playgrounds of sustainability. And anything you name has all these 5 things that are related together, pulled together. They're all intertwined. There is no boundary. So now, what does that mean? Well, let's talk about what it means for just a second. Let's talk about the way people talk about projects and the things that we do. We put a boundary around the things that we do, and we call it a project, right? We're in an effort right now. It's a workshop, it's a chat, it's a conversation. But let's say that we are collectively a team, and we're going to build a building. So tell me what the line items are for our building. And let's start with the ones that are kind of the traditional line items. So what do I need to have some dollars to do in order to build a budget? Land. Okay, so I need to own a place to build something. So there's going to be $100,000. I just bought some land, okay? What's another line item in my budget?
Site work and foundations.
Site work and foundation. He's an architect, so he knows about these line items here, and we'll put in $50,000 there.
We need an architect.
We need an architect, so fees,
250,000.
software. $2 million.
There you go.
Because he comes with Jasper Johns. What else?
Access and utilities.
Okay,
Access and utilities.
access and utilities. I gotta buy water, right? And electricity and roads and those kinds of things. I don't know how much. Let's put in another 100,000. This is fiction anyway. Who cares? Okay, what else? What's another line item in the
Building materials?
building materials? So that's the wood, the concrete, the glass, the steel. Let's see, we're going to put in $2 million for that too, because it's going to be a big old building. Okay, what else?
Taxes.
Taxes, and that might be up here with fees. Let's just include it up there. Okay.
And labor.
Labor. Somebody's got to do this, right? Labor. So let's put in $500,000 because we're going to use child labor. So Other line items. This is the way we think about our world, okay? But these things are also part of our budget. These are what everybody calls the internalities. These are what we always think about as budgets. Budgets are all false. All of them. Every single budget is false. Period. It's a tool that we use. Here's what doesn't sit on the budget. And it doesn't sit in the budget because we don't know what number to put with it. Stormwater runoff. Okay? So, stormwater runoff. I don't know. There's going to be some kind of fee maybe by the city, but I just want to pay that fee. I want to build something. I want all my water to go wherever water goes when you build something in the city. Well, where does that water go? It goes to a storm drain, right? And the storm drain drains to something, either some place that we clean up that water or some place that we throw that water, probably on somebody else's back, probably on the disenfranchised, the poor, and the low power structure within our community because they can't fight back. What's another externality? Well, maybe we're going to build an office building. Maybe we want worker retention. Maybe we want that, but what's the value we put on that? You know, if I build an office building and I'm a CEO of a company and I hire somebody and that person stays with me for 20 years because I built the right kind of an environment and that person just wants to be there and they're highly productive. In fact, there's another one, productivity. Indoor air quality, so air quality is on here. So these are, we could list hundreds of them. They don't ever sit in the budget because we don't know what dollar to put there. But if I'm building a building and I'm a CEO, I should be thinking about these things because if I can get the air quality in my building to be very good, then I might be able to retain a worker and I might have fewer sick days. And all these things start adding into the budget. So here's my advice as we as people build budgets. That we go ahead and build our budgets the way we normally do, but then at the bottom of our budget, we just list these externalities. We list them. We're going to have to buy this energy up here, right? These utilities, that's electricity. So that electricity comes into my building and I just pay for it. But what am I really paying for? Well, I might be paying for a mountain in eastern Kentucky to be leveled. I might be paying for mountaintops to be shoved into streams to destroy the streams so that I can get that coal so that I can keep this utility rate as low as I possibly can. Well, that is tied to my building, right? Because I've paid for the electricity. So here we are back. We think of ourselves, now this is our building. And it sits within our community. But not really. It is our community. This wall between our building and our community is porous. And so when a community can come in and push back and say, well, you know what? You're going to put in a 15-acre parking lot, and we're going to give you a fee to do that, and all the water from that parking lot is going to run off of it and into the storm drain, and from the storm drain to those disenfranchised people that we talked about a little while ago. So we don't want you to do that anymore. That's the way we used to let you do things, but now we want you to figure out a way so that when an inch of rainwater falls on that 15-acre parking lot, we want you to hold on to 1 inch of rain. You know, and you've got to build ways to hold on to that, because if you don't, you're shoving the cost of that out of your building and onto the backs of your community. So we subsidize poor design. And we subsidize all kinds of things. We subsidize our transportation system. Mary Beth rode the bus over here. But I didn't. So in this room today, how many people drove a car? How many people were the only person in that car when you drove here today? My hand's up. Okay. The carbon footprint of this group of people in this room right now is pretty high. Doesn't have to be. We've accepted that as part of the cost of being, we've shoved the cost of our exhaust from our vehicle into our community. And now our community has to pay for it in poor air quality. Or we designed a building and it doesn't have a green roof or a white roof. And so we've added to the heat island of our city. And now people are going to die because of that. Because as temperature goes up, disease goes up. Heart disease goes up. Lung diseases go up. People die from those things. Our city bears the cost of those things because we designed it to bear the cost of those things. And so we have to get away from this hierarchical, patriarchal kind of system, and we have to start moving away from self-assertive kinds of strategies, and we have to move into more integrated kinds of strategies. So, and there has to be a balance between those two, right? So let's talk about self-assertive things are like rational, and an integrative way of thinking might be more intuitive. A self-assertive way of thinking might be analysis. Let's study it. But an integrative might be synthesize the ideas of lots of different people, and this is where artists are so incredibly valuable. We might reduce our thinking about the problem so that we can wrap our mind around it, like our budget. Let's keep it just to the line items. Isn't that much simpler? Yes, it is, but it's false. So we need to move from reductionist thinking to holistic thinking. We need to quit thinking linearly. Nature doesn't behave in linear ways. It's more nonlinear and integrated. And in terms of values, we're often looking for expansion. More, more, more. If our city could just grow by another 1 million people, think what our tax base would be. But we need to start thinking, and this is not a political term in this sense, we need to think more conservatively about how we use things and do things and integrate with our community. We're always competitive. We've got to be the best, the biggest, the most expensive, the highest building, whatever it is, and we need to start thinking more cooperatively. Instead of thinking about quantity, maybe we should begin thinking about quality. And in terms of domination, maybe we should start looking for partnerships. So when we're talking about sustainability, the easy thing to think about is the solar panel. The harder thing to think about is this bigger network of ideas. So we need to begin looking for connectedness and relationships and context. We need to put everything that we do in the context of the bigger whole. And I'll just stop there. Because I think I've taken 30 minutes or more anyway. But so thoughts, comments, reactions, and then all we're going to do now is take this philosophy, if you will, on a little trot around the building and in the areas around here. And Karen's going to show us some potential places for art in the next phase of this project. But I really do hope that we don't think about sustainability in terms of, is the paint that I'm going to use on this sculpture going to be low VOC paint? I hope it opens a bigger conversation about these qualitative balances between self-assertive and kind of integrative ways of looking and approaching the problem, and that we break down the barriers between us and nature, because they don't exist. We are nature. We are a social primate. The things we build are qualitatively different than a termite mound, but a termite mound is a building, right? Built by a social group of living things. So we have a lot to learn from termite mounds and the kinds of things that nature builds, using only the resources. They come apart, they become a healthy part of their ecosystem at the end of their life. What we do as humans is we build toxic things to ourselves and to our communities. So we've got to quit doing that. And I'll stop there. So.
I had a comment on expansion.
Okay,
It gets me when I drive around, I see all these new stores being built, and then I see all the vacant stores that no longer have anything in them.
right.
And so we're expanding outward, but we're leaving all these little holes.
Yeah, and fortunately though, and New Albany, I think, is doing a really good job of coming back in. And a lot of cities are, because why? The pocketbook. Because now it's less expensive to go ahead and infill the old places than it is to go out and build new in the old places. Why? Because our materials are getting scarcer. And so it's easier to take that old brick building and turn it into the new brick building than it is to build an entirely new structure somewhere else. And so, fortunately, economics is catching up with, our hopefully desire to move in a new direction.
Well, farmland is
Yeah.
more expensive now than it used to be as well.
It's
And so it's not so cheap to go out and build something new.
right, yeah. Good, because we need that farmland to be farmland, feeding us and absorbing the rainwater and producing oxygen and creating homes for the biodiversity of the planet that's allowing us to have high-quality places to live and good food to eat and those kinds of things. Yes?
What's your connection been to this new Mayor Fisher's sustainable group? Have you worked with them?
I have. I just came from a meeting with the Louisville Metro Tree Commission and Maria Cutter, who is the city's sustainability director. And you know what? Here's the thing. And it's a good segue, thank you. Trim tab. I want to tell you about trim tabs. For you architects in the group, you know the name Buckminster Fuller. Even others will know the name. Okay. Buckminster Fuller's grave says, I believe I haven't been there, but I saw a picture. I think it says trim tab on it. Does anybody know what a trim tab is?
No.
You do? Are you a pilot or a sailor?
I was.
Okay.
Can we tell? Or you-
Yeah. No, I want you to tell.
Well, you trim your ailerons and your rudder and so forth to just hold the thing in position, to control it so that it doesn't drift off. So if you want to climb at a certain rate, you set everything up and you adjust your trim tab to keep it there so that it
Right.
stays on course.
But if you were flying a plane and the only thing that changes is the trim tab, is the plane going to move a little bit?
A little bit.
A little bit. So here's the analogy for Buckminster Fuller. The entire system moves by nudging the smallest piece of it, the trim tab on a boat. So, your rudders and your ailerons are on airplanes and they move things up and down, and rudders are on boat and they move it right and left, okay? So within the rudder, there's a smaller rudder. Within the aileron, did I say that right? There's a smaller aileron. Those are the trim tabs. But all you have to do is nudge those, and you can change the direction of the entire system. And so that's where our efforts are, and I'm back to you. What do you do with a city sustainability office that's brand new, that sits in its first year or close to its first year? You work with your trim tabs. And pretty soon, the entire system is moving because we're in huge systems. A city is a huge system. It doesn't change overnight. But you can build a rain garden, or you could have an art display that gets one person to think differently, or you can build a playground that connects one child to nature in a different way, that grows up, that builds the next green building. So that's trim tab work. And so that's the work that we'll be doing as artists and members in our community, is we're the trim tabs.
I don't know if you think this will help you, but you might want to use this back too. The other thing it does, basically, is instead of you having to push or hold, putting pressure all the time, you trim it, and then you can take your hand off the wheel
And go do
keep
something
going.
else.
So
Perfect.
it
Very
saves
good.
you from a lot of extra effort
Right.
trying to control it.
Very good. All right, let's take a walk for those that want to. This is not going to be a very long walk because it's hot. But let's take this philosophy out into the environment, because we can't do much in this room. We have to do it in our community.